Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and on this episode of King of the Hill, the last for a while, I want to talk about the Dancing King of the Disco Dancers. It is not a coincidence that the Dancing King is going last in Phase 1. This is an incredibly powerful but complex ability. I'm actually really surprised that I don't get more questions about it. This is one of the few cards that actually has detailed examples in the original rulebook explaining just how this ability works, and it took me several reads before I understood it. That 70s rulebook is actually one of the few rulebooks I recommend keeping in the bigger, geekier box because it covers examples not covered in the comprehensive rulebook, and I've seen Dancing King used incorrectly so often that I banned this faction from being given to new players. I'm just going to warn you, this is going to be a very complex video, which is why I'm including diagrams and sequences as much as possible. So what does the Dancing King do? The ongoing ability states, when a standard action directly affects one or more minions here, you may choose another minion here to be affected the same way. I've decided to underline each of the words or phrases that requires particular attention on this ability, and you'll notice there are a lot of them. It makes sense to start with the standard action. By now, the definition has become pretty well understood, with the sole nuance being that self-burying actions are not standard actions. This was clarified with the Nancy the Spider. A standard action is any action that leaves play on execution, and it comprises most of the actions in Smash Up, but not every standard action affects a minion. The next phrase is one or more minions here. With the Disco Dancers, I like to define what I call the pool, the source minion, and the destination minion. The pool constitutes all the minions who were originally affected by the action. The source is one of those minions who happens to be at Dancing King's base. The destination is the minion who receives Dancing King's benefit, also at the same base. The best way to think of an example is to use an action that affects more than one minion, but not all minions, and affects them in different ways. I'll be using Pumping Iron as an example. If Pumping Iron targets minions on two different bases, they are both part of the pool, but only one can be considered the source. If both minions are on the same base, then they are still both part of the pool, but either one of them can be chosen to be the source, though you probably want to pick the +3 minion. Then, with regards to another minion here, you need another minion who is not in the pool to be the destination minion. This can be Dancing King himself, as if he was not in the pool, as another is referring not to Dancing King, but to the minions originally affected. The next part to consider is the word directly, which is actually my least favorite keyword in Smash Up. It causes so much confusion, and I won't dive into it too deeply for this video, but in a general sense, it makes sense to think of it as the word originally affected. Because when Dancing King copies the ability onto another minion, it is considered indirectly affected, and this is an important distinction, because it's actually possible for the destination to receive a benefit multiple times, as long as it is not the source minion. The rulebook gives an example of this, where a diva copies Fast as Lightning, along with Dancing King, We Are Family, and Funky Town, for a total of +8. So, as long as a minion wasn't originally targeted, Dancing King will not stop other copying effects from occurring, which is really powerful, because it means that you could achieve multiple power boosts without having excessive amounts of minions on the same base. It means that Dancing King complements the diva as opposed to making her ability unnecessary. The most important part of the ability is effect, which I will cover in detail in a bit. There are several ways to affect a minion, which are broken out in the rulebook under the definition of effect, but a minion has to be affected in some way. The second to last phrase is one of the most confusing because the words fail the ability, affected the same way. The same way implies that multiple effects from the same ability would apply, but that is not the case. You can only choose one of the criteria to copy. For example, with Fast as Lightning, you can copy the power increase, or choose to copy the returning of the minion, but not both. And the same way has different implications for each different type of effect, which I'm going to cover exhaustively. But at a high level, the end result of what happens to A also happens to B, regardless of the formula used to determine what happens. The destination minion does not need to meet the prerequisites that the source minion had to meet. The last part of the ability is when. This means that part of the effect of the copy might actually be deferred, although it needs to be declared in advance. For example, with Fast as Lightning, you have to state which ability you will be copying at the time the card is played, even though the return portion won't happen until later. Most effects are immediate anyway, but there are cases when it is not, especially if the ability resumes at the end of the turn. And it needs to be when, as opposed to after, to ensure that the here part of the ability is preserved. This matters with movement particularly. The easiest way to resolve this is to break it down into 3 steps. First, determine what will happen to the source. The source will be moved to this particular base. Then you select the destination minion to receive the same benefit. Then you apply both effects at the same time. In the case of movement, both minions end up on the same base. The actual implications of this ability depend on the portion of effect you are using, and one of the reasons why I love Dancing King, despite the headache he causes, is that you are only limited by your creativity. There is a ton you can do with this card. At a high level, you can copy your good effects onto yourself. You can benefit from other players' good effects. You can copy your negative effects for double punishment, or you can take an eye for an eye approach when a negative ability happens to you. So when I construct a Disco Dancer strategy, I decide which game plan I want to execute because it's rare that all 4 apply equally. So looking at the definition of effect, a card is affected if it is moved or transferred. Right now, minions are not transferred, they are moved, so transferred is ignored. With move, I already covered the example that a minion is moved to the same base. This is convenient, even when deferred, because it means that a minion that is moved off the base can still have the ability copied because the decision is made at the moment the action is played. So both You Call This Archaeology and the Revenge produce the same result, because both movements are queued up before they actually occur, and the destination is given the special ability before it goes to the discard pile. The next category is removed from play. This can be positive or negative depending on your perspective. The Disco Dancers can use I Will Survive to return multiple minions, just like Port Me Up. In fact, if you have a ship's engineer, either of these actions can copy the return, which gets translated into a move by a ship's engineer as long as her criteria is still met. But the removal from play can be even more powerful because Dancing King can quickly take out multiple minions. For interesting examples of this, I like the Itty Critters because they pretty much cover the spread. Evolution can destroy one of your minions, which results in you destroying one of theirs, but only you get the benefit since the benefit does not affect the minion. Coach Combat does the same thing, which results in double destruction, the second of which does not need to meet the prerequisite. I Select You can place a minion on the bottom of a deck, which makes it convenient for circumventing destruction immunity. With Recall Critter, you are going to lose the minion anyway, but Dancing King can heighten the reward. Critter Cube can shuffle in 2 minions. The next part of the ability is changed in power or controller. For changing controller, the Ignobles can be good because they can easily affect their own minions on bases, but I prefer the Kitty Cats. They have 2 powerful control cards as well as one that is easier to facilitate. Stealing a minion to destroy it with Catfight becomes really powerful when the destruction is copied, and the Disco Dancers love the card draw. You still have 9 lives and even Invisible Bicycle as standard actions that you can copy. For being changed in power, this can get tricky because not each minion is changed in power the same way. Sometimes it's straightforward, like Augmentation granting +4 power. But Diva can also copy Augmentation, and Dancing King can copy it onto Diva, which means that Diva receives +8, and there is a total boost of +12. From 3 power with 1 minion in action, you could add 17 to bring that to 20. But for an action that has a variable power increase, such as We Will Rock You, this is where my 3-step process comes into play. If a minion has no power counters, it would not be affected by the action already, since it did not increase in power. Therefore, you can choose another minion to copy from. If I have a worker with 3 counters and a Disco Lou with none, Dancing King can grant Disco Lou 3 power, matching the output that the worker received. Basically, the first minion was given 3 power, so the second should too. Having an action attached also counts as being affected, but obviously this violates a standard action. Having an ability cancelled is interesting though, because this can actually occur from a standard action. It mostly occurs from specials. Obviously, Potion of Paralysis already does what Dancing King would do, so it's irrelevant. But Halflings can play Last Call, which would affect the minion just played, and Dancing King could be useful copying that ability onto the right minion. Rude Awakening would also produce the same effect, but I have a hard time using that card and Dancing King on the same base. But should any new abilities come into play, this would be very interesting. The final example is the most confusing, and that is having a +1 counter removed or attached. Despite this resulting in a change of power, that is not actually the effect that is occurring. This means that the rules for copying it are different. Removing a counter is simpler. You remove the same number of counters. This could make Purge the Demon really powerful, as you can wipe all the counters on 2 minions. And if you don't think it works that way, just play Purge the Demon on the larger of the 2, then copy it onto the smaller, and make it a moot point. With Who Wants to Live Forever, if there is another minion on the same base who has power counters, you can remove them as well. When counters are placed, the same rule applies: place the same number of counters. This can be just a single counter, or multiple counters, and even Body Shop, where you copy the number of counters from the source minion. So if you Body Shop an 8-powered minion and put 5 of those counters on a minion on Dancing King's base, and 3 counters on another minion at Dancing King's base, I can copy the 5 or the 3 counters, but not both. Obviously, I could just put all 8 on one and copy that, but maybe I put the other 3 on a different base entirely so that a diva there can copy it. But where this gets really confusing is in transferring counters, which seems like an add and a remove, but is in fact neither. To copy a transfer means to in fact copy the transfer. If A transfers a counter to B and C wants to copy it, then C does not place the same number of counters as B. A tries to transfer additional counters to C, which may not exist. The best test is to ensure that the total number of counters does not change, only their assignment. It's rare that this would actually occur unless you are reacting to another player's action, as you could just transfer those counters anyway in most cases. I think Dancing King easily has the most complicated ability in the game, and it can occur multiple times per turn. I think it's important to read the clarification carefully because there is a lot there. But this minion can do a lot, and the only limitations are his localization and your imagination. Because of this, I like to target factions that have both movement and return as well as other benefits, so that I can use Dancing King multiple times. But power increases are by far the most straightforward, and there is no shortage of candidates. The Cowboys are a good fit because duels can create an opportunity for extra actions. Quick Draw can generate 4 power, which can be copied, because the same way results in the other minion getting 4 power, and you still have your action with Dancing King can copy as well. A dueling card, like Run 'em Off, can also result in 3 power, which can again be copied, resulting in an extra 14 power. The removal of 2 minions, and whatever the Run 'em Off action does, which Dancing King can also copy. The ability to copy actions multiple times per turn really heightens the strength of Dancing King, and it's a reason why I feel like Dancing King can be broken with the right pairing. The Astronites can have some crazy walking carpet plays, because Dancing King and Walking Carpet can win bases by themselves. Every action happens twice, so Yield to Rage and Block the Probe each provide 4 power, and Yield to Rage can provide an extra action. Best of all, I Will Survive will let you return them both, so you can do it again. Space Prince playing Use the 4s is at least 8 free power that doesn't use your regular plays. When I did my Call the Week episode, I was surprised when players said that they rarely saw good pairings for the Disco Dancers. I agree, there can be bad pairings, you need standard actions. But the Disco Dancers have a great assortment themselves for self-synergy. He can boost the rewards of cards that depend on the number of minions affected. Sometimes I get asked why these videos are from the King minion perspective, as opposed to the factions, and there are many reasons, but one of them is that, as the King minion, this card should be singularly powerful and strategy driving. You aren't guaranteed to draw your King minion, so it needs to count when you do. In one of my most memorable, greatest victories ever, I won without ever personally scoring a base, and it's because of Dancing King, Disco Dancing Aliens. If you start with Dancing King and an Invader, you can bounce your Invader and another minion at the same time, and all you have to do is stall until you get to 5 VP and the right cards, to pull off an amazing terraforming play. Because of Celebration, you can play 2 actions. So Terraform for Cave of Shinies, which gives you an extra minion, which should be 2 divas with your regular play. And if you have 3 divas, Dancing King, and a 5th minion, Last Dance on Cave of Shinies will net you 10 VP and bring the game to a surprise, epic finish. What makes this combo brutal is that you have Disco Lose, which can recur the alien beam-ups. You can double tap Invasion to scatter them further. The Disco Dancers have fairly decent card draw, which helps this combo occur. And as far as stall tactics go, you can have Dancing King double tap 2 copies of Beam Up, 2 copies of Disintegration, which bypasses the prerequisite on the copy, Abduction, and Invasion. And when the other player inevitably starts playing on another base without you, Crop Circles can reset that base with an invader play. You may have to give up an uncontested base, but still, this is about as achievement unlocked as it gets, and Dancing King is the one who made it happen because every annoying alien action all of a sudden counts twice. There is great power in Dancing King's obtuse wording, and the Disco Dancers have a lot of hidden potential. I know many players who say that they are stupidly strong, and I know many players who haven't been able to figure out how to use them. Don't let the challenge factor of the faction keep you from embracing a very creative playstyle. If you have any memorable experiences with the Disco Dancers, let me know in the comments. So, that makes all 74 factions. One last action awareness video, and then Custom Faction Month will begin, followed by Phase 2 of Crank It Up. So until it's time to feature a new faction, this is it for King of the Hill. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, let's shut it down, literally.